Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of Westminster's Finance Committee of the Mayor and Common Council. We are in the midst of our budget process, and the committee will be meeting to consider various issues that are important to that process. Today, we're going to begin with a presentation from our consultants at Evergreen Solutions on some possible salary structure changes. And so welcome to our guests. Thank you very much. And Ms. Matthews will let you introduce the subject.
Thank you. As you indicated, Council President Pecoraro, we hired Evergreen Solutions to do an update of the city's salary structure. They are also the same firm, as you likely recall, that did our study about three years ago. We are joined today by Nancy Berkeley. She is actually traveling, so she will not have her video on, but Nancy is the person calling in from the call. Nancy is the consultant who presented to you back in April of 2018. Also on the Evergreen Solutions team is Angel Yazbek. Angel will actually be doing the presentation and will be sharing her screen shortly. And then the last member of the Evergreen team is Patrick Hagman. So with that, Chair Pecoraro, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Yazbek to share her screen and present the information.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. Can everyone see the screen okay and hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, Nancy, did you want to introduce it or do you want me to go ahead and take the wheel?
Please go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Good morning. It's a pleasure to present this presentation about the results of our compensation update for the City of Westminster. Today we're going to give you just a brief overview of the results as well as our recommendations for updating the pay structure at the city. First, I want to just give you a brief overview of the study process. This will be a refresher for those of you who are around for the 2018 study. I'll also go through our assessment of current conditions, where employee salaries are in their current pay ranges, a compensation review, which will be an overview of the market results that we collected, and also unveil the updated pay plan, as well as recommendations for implementation methods and costs. So to date, these are the tasks that we have completed for the study. The first being assessing the current conditions of the pay system, which I will go through in more detail in a couple of slides here. We also conducted an external equity analysis by surveying organizations in the market to determine what would be competitive salary ranges for a variety of positions. Next, we revised the pay plan to be a little more competitive with the market based on our market findings. And then we also individually assigned classifications to an appropriate pay grade or pay range based on our findings. And then subsequently, we developed the most appropriate alternatives for implementing the revised pay plan and pay ranges, as well as estimated some annualized salary costs for implementing the proposed pay plan. A remaining deliverable after we refine our recommendations and revisit all alternatives would be to prepare and provide a draft report. So to start, we took a look to see where employee salaries are within their current pay ranges. So currently the city has an open range pay plan, which means there's an established minimum, midpoint, and maximum, but salaries are otherwise free to fall anywhere within that pay range. And there are a total of 19 pay grades within that pay plan with range spreads of 60%. So that means that the difference between the pay grade maximum and minimum is 60%. So when we reviewed employee salary within the pay ranges, we did something called a quartile analysis, just kind of seeing within each quartile where is the clustering of employee salaries. So we're seeing that there are still quite a few employee salaries that are below the market midpoint, but it is something that we're going to be addressing with our implementation option. The reason that we focus on that midpoint so much is that the market midpoint is the point in the pay plan in which employees are receiving a salary that is reflective of them performing the work proficiently and satisfactorily with respect to the duties in their classification. Next, we collected salary range information from a variety of peers in the area. So that included 17 local governments. In consideration of the list of these peers were peers that were relatively close in geographic proximity, as well as similar in size, similar in service delivery, characteristics such as that. And we did collect salary range information for 67 classifications. So that's a very good representative sample for all the classifications of the city. And the average number of matches for each classification was 6.8. So as you're aware, not every organization is going to have an exact match for each position, so that's why we see that number 6.8%, or sorry, 6.8 matches. So based on our review of the market, we find that the city is behind the midpoint for their salary ranges by 3.2%. So that's not a huge margin by any stretch of the imagination, but it is something that is to be addressed later on. So we are going to focus on that 3.2% because when we move forward for our recommendations for adjusting the pay plan, we do ultimately adjust it by 3% to catch up with that market midpoint. And I do want to also emphasize that this table here is an average of all the differentials across all classifications that we surveyed. So some positions were in fact a little bit ahead in the market, and some were even more behind in the market, which I'll speak to in a little bit more detail. So in terms of the proposed pay plan, and I'll show you what the plan looks like in the next slide, but I mentioned that we increased all the ranges by 3% just to catch up with that market midpoint. So that means that all of the minimums, midpoints, and maximums across all pay grades were increased by 3%. But we are otherwise retaining the overall design features, keeping that open range structure, the 19 pay grades, as well as range spreads at 60%. And then we also looked at individually slotted classifications, looking at the market data as well as the internal equity at the organization to make sure that when we are assigning pay grades, we're not creating any upsets with any new pay grade assignments. So specifically, we retained most of the pay grade assignments, but we did increase some of the pay grades for positions that are hard to recruit and retain, which were in police and public works. So not every position in police and public works saw an increase in pay grades, but many of those classifications did see some kind of pay grade increase. As we saw in the market, those were the positions that were the most behind the market. This slide shows the proposed pay plan. So if you're already familiar with the city structure, you'll notice that's pretty similar overall. We just increased the whole structure by 3% to, again, catch up with that market midpoint. In terms of implementation methods, we are going to stick with, we do recommend essentially a similar method that we used in the previous study, which is called Move Toward Market using a 4-tier implementation method. So what this ultimately means is that we perform a calculation to determine an employee's comp ratio or the relation between their current salary as well as the proposed midpoint. And then based on that and how long they have been in their position or classification, we're going to move their salaries closer to the midpoint. So the idea being the longer they have been with the city, the more aggressively we're going to move their salary toward that midpoint. And then likewise, the higher that comp ratio, the more aggressively we're going to move their salary toward that midpoint. So you'll see in that third bullet, we have 4 different categories, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 7 years, 7 to 10 years, and more than 10 years. So the idea, again, being that if someone has been in their position for, say, 11 years or more, we're going to move their salaries more aggressively toward that market point or midpoint compared to an employee who has been in their classification or position for only 2 years. And so this is designed to alleviate compression issues. Obviously, this is something that will have to be continuously worked on, but at least for this implementation method, it's going to put us in the step of getting aligned with the current market. This next slide shows the estimated annualized cost for implementing this option. We are working with essentially 3 different sub-permutations of these options. So as you can see, options, I'm sorry, my computer just advanced on me and I wasn't done speaking. So we've seen here that each option is going to have a slightly different cost for implementation. Part of it is moving employee salaries to the proposed minimum. So as I mentioned, we're going to be increasing pay ranges by 3%. We're also adjusting some of those pay grade assignments for some of the police and public works positions. So by the time we do that, there is some cost associated with moving employee salaries to at least the new minimum of their proposed pay range. So if you're looking at that top line there of $266,000 some dollar figure, that's the cost associated with moving employee salaries to that new minimum. And then amount to move toward market, that's just going to be the remaining cost of implementation to decompress those salaries. And I do want to also point out that the costs up here are just associated with base salary only. They do not include overtime, and they also do not include benefits. So that is the conclusion of our presentation. At this time, I'll go ahead and take any questions, or if you want me to flip back to any previous slides, I'm also happy to do that.
Mr. President, or Mr. Chair, who am I asking for permission here?
I'll answer to either. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you go back to the slide that showed the different pay grades and the minimum, the midpoint, on the left? Yeah, that's it. So grade 105 and 106, and I don't know if this, I guess, Ms. Matthews, this is a question for you. Who falls, what types of positions are 105 and 106?
I don't remember specifically, Mayor Dominic. I believe that the 105 pay grade may not have actually been used. We did have an employee in, thinking somewhere in like the 106, 107, Angel might be able to help. It was our police custodial position, but as you may recall, we went to a contractual service. So I don't believe we actually have any current positions that are in those lower pay grades.
Okay, that's good. I was looking at that, and that's below what the soon-to-be minimum wage is going to be, and living wage.
Right.
And I just, I noticed that, and or at least the minimum is, and I just don't want any city employees to be below what we consider to be, a living wage. That's all I wanted to see. I wasn't sure if we had anybody in this tier, so it doesn't sound like we do. That was my only question for that slide. Thank you.
I will go back and just double check that. That'll be pretty easy to do, but I do remember that our police custodial position was the lowest one in that position. It no longer exists.
Okay, thank you. Leah, let me know what you find, but it doesn't sound like we have anything. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other questions? If nobody else, could you go back to the last slide?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Oh, not that last slide, this
No,
one.
not the very last one.
You'd like to see the footer.
So I'm sorry. So if you could just spend a little more time on this to help understand, what's happening in these different options.
Yes.
And just walk through that again. So because they all have the same starting point in terms of what it would take to bring the salaries to the new minimums. And so is that sort of the first step, that you bring the salaries to the new minimums, and then there's additional funds necessary to move the rest of the way towards the market? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. Yep, and so the difference between the options is option 1 is the most aggressive with that 4-tier approach. Options 2 and 3 still employ a 4-tier approach, but move those salaries less aggressively with each option. So for instance, 2 is less aggressive than 1, and 3 is the least aggressive in terms of moving those salaries toward that midpoint or market position.
So we have what, like 160 or so employees, is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm just really surprised that after the work we did before, that we still need to move 145 employees in order to get closer. I mean, I thought that we would have been much closer to having people where they needed to be after that first round. After the previous adjustments that we made. Really almost the entire city staff, still would need to receive adjustments in order to get there.
Ms. Yalsbeck, may I jump in and maybe ask the question? And because this is a discussion point, Council President Pecoraro, that I had with Evergreen earlier this week, kind of specifically. I think there's a couple things that have happened, and if I misspeak, I'm sure one of the Evergreen folks will jump in and feel free to correct me. But one of the discussions we had in terms of bringing this information forward, specifically on this slide, is this whole idea of phasing. And I believe it would probably be somewhat accurate to say that while the city spent 3 years phasing because that's what we needed to do from a financial standpoint, the market was shifting. So while we were moving people, the market was also shifting. So I think that's probably a partial contributing factor to what you're seeing. Also, as Ms. Yazbek indicated in her presentation, we do have a number of employees in certain police positions, certain public works positions, where the market has shifted much more considerably than 3%. And those employees are proposed to be reclassified up a grade. So part of what I think you're also seeing, besides just the market shifting while we were having to phase, is also the impact of positions that the market has really moved very rapidly on, and the need to reclassify those positions. Ms. Yazbek, did I do a reasonably good job of explaining perhaps what happened?
Yeah, so part of it is the phase-in, but we're also seeing, certainly in your region and across the country, that the police and public works positions, especially when we're looking at the entry and mid-level, are being paid a little more aggressively in the market compared to what we saw a few years ago. So we are seeing that, especially with those positions, the market is increasing the rates for those positions, and that's why specifically when we were analyzing our market results, that led to our recommendation of increasing those positions of a pay grade to be a little bit more competitive with the current market.
This is Nancy, and I would just say again with what Angela mentioned and Ms. Matthews mentioned. Again, we studied this quite extensively, had several discussions again about, yes, why are we seeing this? What's happened in the market? What's happened? And as Angela has mentioned, that's exactly what happened. Market moved a little more rapidly than we anticipated. And again, the phasing definitely, when you're phasing and you're doing those adjustments, meanwhile, others in the market are advancing their salaries ahead. So you're still a little bit behind, quite frankly, when you phase these adjustments. Again, hard to catch up, period, for any client of ours when there's I'll call it a deficit, if you will, or you're behind in both the salary ranges and in individual salaries to begin with, which is where you were when we did the first study. So.
If I may add to that, because part of the discussion for the committee's benefit that I had with Evergreen in terms of developing alternatives, and as Ms. Yazbek said, these three options are a function of how aggressively we move employees towards the midpoint of the range. I specifically asked them whether, and that was part of the thinking in developing these alternatives, would the city be better off being less aggressive, but being able to do everything in one fell swoop rather than phase? I think the consensus of the Evergreen staff was we don't want to keep falling behind by having to phase. So we need to probably put our best foot forward and be as aggressive as we can from a fiscal standpoint, rather than try to get into phasing. I think as Berkeley mentioned, I think in one of our calls this week, that we need to kind of get to a point where we're caught up to some degree at least, and to be able to, I think she characterized it as give more normal pay grade structure or more normal customary pay adjustments than what you're seeing on the screen right now. Ms. Yazbek, I wanted to ask a specific question regarding options 1, 2, and 3. To kind of put it in some context that we've talked about over the last couple of years with the committee. Would it be fair to say that as we move from option 1 to 3, option 1 not only is somewhat aggressive in moving towards market, but probably, and this is a question, probably provides the most alleviation of compression issues being created by the shift? Is that a fair statement or not?
That is a fair statement. So with option 1, that's going to create the most alleviation of compression. So obviously it's not going to solve everything overnight. That's something that needs to be continuously worked on, but it's going to at least be the strongest step in that direction.
That's been important to the committee, so I wanted to make sure that we called that out to you.
And I, if I may, again, we say I want to be very clear that it's helping to alleviate.
Right.
The cost would be beyond probably whatever if you were literally alleviating. So it is, these are all, again, it's very specific in the move toward market, helping to alleviate. And again, of course, the more aggressively you can do that, we can structure it any way you want, but it's going to cost, absolutely. But that's for the previous years and years behind of not being able to move salaries.
Right, and just as a reminder for the committee members, before Evergreen did the study several years ago, the city had gone 12 years without doing a compensation and classification study. I certainly, as I have talked about this issue with employees, try to be very clear that, we're never going to necessarily make up, nor do I know of any other local government for the most part that tried to make up for what happened in the late 2000s when we had the recession and a lot of employers, including Westminster, were not able to give salary adjustments. There's very few employers that I'm aware of that actually tried to make that up. So I think sometimes that nuance gets particularly lost with what we're trying to do here with some of our more tenured employees who were here during that time. But Ms. Berkeley, I appreciate your comment because I certainly wouldn't want to suggest either that any of these options are necessarily going to take a long tenured employee and ensure that he or she is going to be at the minimum of their salary range, because that's certainly not the case.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor?
So, Ms. Matthews, you kind of touched on one thing I was going to ask, which was, I believe, was it Nancy that was speaking before you? It's hard to tell without video. I wasn't sure who was talking. So you pointed out that it would help alleviate compression issues, but it wouldn't alleviate. And I was going to ask, do you know any municipalities or governments at all that have alleviated compression completely?
Ms. Berkeley, I'll kind of jump in first. I think it depends on the employer, and I can't speak to kind of the circumstances that Westminster was dealing with. I would say that in my kind of 35 years in local government, I have not personally worked someplace, and I think the Evergreen folks can give you more context because I can only relate to my own experience. I have not personally worked anywhere that went 12 years without doing a study. Most of the places I have worked tried to do a study every 3 to 5 years, which I believe is what Evergreen recommended a few years ago. In some cases where I have worked, they do have unionized workforces, and there are sometimes specific contractual requirements with the unions to do studies on a certain regular basis. So I think that's one difference between Westminster and perhaps some other jurisdictions in terms of kind of the catch-up that needed to be done. And certainly a lot of this depends on, fiscal capacity. There are certainly local governments, that have many more resources than any of the places I've ever worked. So I think it does vary a lot. I guess Ms. Berkeley or Ms. Yazbek or Mr. Higman, what do you typically see in terms of alleviating compression?
I'll speak first, and then if any of our team wants to come in after this. But no, in the 8 years I've been doing this work for Evergreen, and I started with Evergreen coincidentally was a few years after the last recession. This is effectively continuously what we were seeing, even up until just before the pandemic, quite frankly. So with many of our clients, even quite frankly, some who were doing studies more frequently, we would see most of the time compression below the midpoint, some clustering of salaries, I'll call it, below the midpoint. So, and I haven't worked with anyone who was like, let's just in one fell swoop be able to, have the magic wand and we have unlimited fiscal resources so that we can make up, if you will, for employees who were not receiving generally, increases during that time of the last recession. So,
okay. So the answer is no. And I just wanted to make sure because, that doesn't give us an excuse not to try. But my next question is, if someone's doing something better than us, I was going to ask how. So, that's why. But I didn't think so. I thought the answer was no, or it was extremely low percentage. The federal government doesn't count. They have their own printing press, so they can do things that that other levels of government cannot. So I was curious about that, and then I did have another question. I'm not sure what that was. We may need to come back to that when I remember what it is. So can you? Well, I do have a third question while I'm trying to think of the second one. These three tiers. So obviously, they're tiered. Best, mid, worst. I don't know how, or good, better, best. However you want to phrase that. Where does this really put us though? Like, if we depending on which tier, we could make work. How good of a position does it put us compared to our peer municipalities? And because that's really what I want to know, right? Like, if no municipality has solved compression, there are two factors here. We want to treat our staff as good as possible. I do believe that the number one thing you should invest in are the people, because at the end of the day, the organization is just made up of people. Everything else is just, surrounds them. But the other thing is we want to be competitive. I think we have a nice place to live. I think people like to work close to home, and we have a good place to be. We know that there are governments, within an hour from here that are going to pay more because they're bigger governments and so forth. But we think we have some advantages over them in some ways. But does any of this really fix that problem where we're a competitive employer? Those are the two things I want to know. I guess the second one is what I'm asking you. Like, how competitive of an employer are we at any of these tiers compared to where we are now? Because my next follow-up is, and I don't think you're gonna have the answer to this, but it would be really nice if you did, is like, do you have any information on the cost? So I think you answering the first question might be tied to this. That's why I want to throw it in there. Do you have any information or data for the cost of not keeping up? What does it cost our organization through turnover and training and things like that? What's the cost of not doing anything compared to the cost of fixing it? So I just figured that might help you answer the first question too, or the second, however you're numbering them.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we wouldn't necessarily have the cost of the turnover. That's something that the city would have internally in terms of, the cost of training police staff, public works staff, other staff as well. But in terms of how competitive you would be, adopting a pay plan is certainly a very good first step because it starts with the ranges. And then in terms of moving employee salaries, it's something that has to be a continuous dedication. So for instance, it's nice I spent all these options to you today, but effectively, if salaries do not continue to progress after that, it's not going to remain competitive. So I would say, obviously option one is the strongest option, but it needs to be option one in addition to continuous dedication to moving employee salaries, rewarding the good performance, giving cost of living adjustments as needed. So really, the long answer is it's a continuous dedication. So regardless of the options you implement, obviously one's going to be the most aggressive. 3 is not a bad one either, but it needs to be done in combination with continuous annual follow-up to make sure that you continue to progress those employees' salaries, rewarding them for good work, rewarding them for staying with the city, things like that.
Ditto, and to explain even more my comment of being more like a normal, if you will, organization, it is to maintain, again, the pay structure at a competitive position, which of course you're doing with doing these studies again periodically. It's an absolutely good thing to do. And as Angel mentioned, if you can do the best you can here, if you will, with making adjustments and continuously do that, bottom line, if you can, any organization, maintain to the best of your ability a competitive pay structure and get as many salaries as possible of employees who are performing proficiently and satisfactorily, at least close to that market point, that midpoint, and keep them there, which means, again, back to what Angel mentioned, continuing to progress those salaries as best you can or keep them around that midpoint. Not that they shouldn't go beyond that, but at least at that point. But again, you are not unlike others. What I think had you fall behind was, again, the phasing, unfortunately, I think was creating a little bit of a misleading, impression that you're making progress. Meanwhile, others were probably surpassing you.
And if I may just add a couple of comments just on my own experience. And I think, Mayor, to your point about what is the cost of turnover, and I think it manifests itself in different ways depending on which department you're talking about. In the police department specifically, which is one of the employee groups that, all three of these alternatives kind of target, if you will, trying to address recruitment and retention issues, there can be some very hard dollar cost in terms of if their staffing falls at a certain point, and we certainly have seen that over the years, where they are actually having to backfill and use overtime dollars to fill those gaps. I think when we look at some other areas, perhaps the street department, for example, they're not going to necessarily, they have the staff they have. It's not a question of minimum staffing because they're not typically, they're not a 24/7 operations other than in significant snowfalls. What I think impacts the street department, just using that as an example, I'd say the same thing about utility maintenance. If they are short-staffed, then it has, probably what suffers, I'm going to take a guess, is not necessarily manifesting itself in a hard dollar cost. It's showing up in terms of preventative maintenance activities that perhaps they simply just don't have the staff to do. There's just work not being able to be done. So I think there's hard dollar cost impacts. And then I think there's just work that doesn't get done because staffing falls below a certain level. I think the other comment in terms of your question about how competitive and where does this leave us, I think as a reminder, our market midpoints are tied to kind of the median of the marketplace, which I think is a very common target in my experience. I've worked for two organizations during my 35 years that actually targeted the 75th percentile. Those were organizations that had the financial means to do that, but that is unusual in my experience. So I certainly wouldn't want to suggest that you invest all this money and we're not going to, say, lose police officers to, a Howard County government, for example. I think those kind of transitions are likely to still happen. But I think certainly, what we're trying to propose today would certainly make us much more competitive, both on an entry-level standpoint and, I think investing in the employees we have through the move to market adjustments, would certainly reward some of our employees who have tenure with the city as well.
So I guess or Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
So, I do believe there's a cost to not doing things like this. I think especially the initial portion of the pay study, for instance, one of the areas that did help significantly were newer police officers, with no tenure, the ones first coming in. I think there was a 20-some% jump, I believe, or it was close to that. It was significant, and I know that was a place where we had higher turnover. I know that turnover for a police officer, putting a police officer through the academy, by the time they start, we're like $100,000 in. So it doesn't take much of a impact to turnover in certain departments. Certainly the police department's going to have the highest cost because of the police academy. Even with laterals, we, from out of state, we have to send them to some kind of a training. So I think, it takes a very little impact on turnover to have a big impact on costs in certain of those areas. Of course, with, you use streets as an example, and, preventative maintenance keeps you from having to spend more money down the road. We talk about with roads all the time. We have a fiber project that the street department runs essentially with in terms of installations and so forth, and that's only going to keep growing and speeding up, and maintenance is going to be a factor there. So when I know with government budgets it's different than in business. I know how awful it is when a key employee leaves. For me personally, like what it absolutely does to my schedule, my life for weeks or months. And I imagine that's what's happening within certain departments. And it absolutely costs us money. There's no doubt. that high turnover is expensive. So I don't know how that impacts the budget though, and how we, if that could help us justify or offset some of these costs. Because realistically, we should be able to offset some of these costs with benefits to turnover costs and how we budget for that. I don't know what we can and can't do with that though, realistically within government budgeting. So I guess that's probably a conversation we're going to have when we get to the actual budget with the information we have here. So I don't have any more questions for anyone outside the city at this point. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things because I know we're going to probably dive into this either in this session or the next. So.
Yeah, you will be, we actually have as part of your discussion points later in your committee meeting to kind of get your feedback on this and see what questions you have or what other data we can provide.
I just have one more question, and that is, have we done any calculations internally? Because I know this is probably outside what Evergreen was tasked with doing, but have we made any calculations on how this affects benefits, the cost for other benefits?
We have not had the opportunity to do that, Council President Pecoraro, because these alternatives were just developed within the last probably 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is that for 3 of these alternatives, as we discussed, there are certain positions in public safety, not all, but in public works. So the vast majority of the adjustments that you're seeing would fall into those 2 areas. And I specifically want to call out police, because as you all know, our sworn police staff participates in LEOPS, the
Right.
state. And we contribute roughly, I don't remember the exact number, but it's roughly about 34% of an officer's base salary for retirement alone to LEOPS.
Mm-hmm.
So we do need to run those calculations. Ms. Colston and I will be doing that. Kind of our initial first step was obviously to present this information to the committee. There's obviously other pieces of the budget that impact the fiscal capacity to pick any of these options. So we wanted to sort of get your feedback initially. We will certainly run those benefit costs, but since a large percentage of any of these options is involving sworn police staff, the benefit impact is going to be very significant.
So we're looking at least another 25% on top of this.
Yeah, I think if you kind of take retirement, I'm going to use a non-sworn office, non-sworn city staff member. You've got Social Security and Medicare, that's 7.65. You've got the retirement contribution that I'm going off memory is probably a little over, probably in the range of 10 or 11%. So you're almost at 20%. There's other benefits too. Those are the major ones for non-sworn staff. So that would be utility maintenance staff, public police department staff. When you start looking at police officers, because there's differences from community to community. In some cases, police officers do not actually participate in Social Security. Ours do. So if you take a 34% LEOPS contribution and then you add on, we're starting to approach the high 40%, high 40s in terms of percentage impact on benefits. And then obviously we do need to go back and look at overtime numbers where there are significant shifts.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're definitely looking at an impact of north of a third on top of this.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Does the committee have any more questions for Evergreen? If not, I will let them.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. And
Thank
Nancy and Patrick will be in touch, okay?
Nancy, please drive safe wherever you're headed.
She's muted. I think she's saying that she stopped. I think Nancy's been trying not to drive while she's been talking.
Yeah, it looks like she's
Yeah, I'm not driving. I'm
But
stationary. But yes,
Right.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks again for the opportunity to stay with you.
Thanks to the three of you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. So what's next, Ms. Matthews?
I wanted to just sort of, I've got a PowerPoint presentation that just wanted to kind of walk through. There's a few other decision points that will impact sort of what we're able to do on salaries as well. So if you give me a moment, I will start sharing screens. Can everyone see that?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
So kind of wanted just to give you all kind of an update on where things stand right now. We do have certain budget components that Ms. Colston and I are reviewing and refining, but we're getting pretty close. Obviously, the salary piece is a huge part of the budget yet to be resolved. We also this morning wanted to follow up on items from either your prior committee discussion on March 10th or actually a discussion that came up at the Mayor and Common Council meeting. These follow-up items include the matters that you referred to the Public Works Committee, some updated information on the discussion you had about demolishing the Wakefield Clubhouse. And then at a prior Mayor and Common Council meeting, not at a committee meeting, there was some discussion about possibly doing a downtown traffic study and wanted to have some discussion about that this morning. And then we have a number of further committee decision or discussion points, certainly a follow-up to the discussion we just had with Evergreen. I'm trying to bring some resolution to the new staffing requests that have been made. We are still in a deficit position on the capital projects fund. This is the non-utility capital. Also thought it would be helpful to update the committee on kind of what the fiber fund is looking like at this juncture, and also sort of how staff is proposing to handle grant funding to Magic based on your last discussion. So I know 2 of the 3 of you are members of the Public Works Committee, so you know what decisions you made, but just for Council President Pecorara's benefit, there were 3 items that the Finance Committee referred to the Public Works Committee. The first dealt with the inflow and infiltration mitigation project and what to set funding at for FY 2022. Mr. Glass, the Public Works Director, did share that he recommended a funding level of 1 million based on the work that he believes can be undertaken in FY 2022. Certainly the committee shared with Public Works Committee, that is, shared with Mr. Glass that they encouraged him to continue to look for opportunities to advance I&I work wherever possible. We also had some discussion on March 10th about the idea to streamline our paving and to make things go a little easier, to possibly enter into a multi-year paving contract. Mr. Glass did not recommend that we do that. Even with any kind of index for oil prices, he felt that bidding it out every single year was in the city's best financial interest. And certainly, I think we all agree Mr. Glass is the expert in that area. The third item that was referred to the Public Works Committee was the funding we have in the current year budget to do a building assessment of the Longwell building, also known as the Armory. After talking that issue through with Mr. Glass, the Public Works Committee did not feel the need for us to undertake that assessment in FY 2021. The Public Works Committee did ask Mr. Glass to forward any prior building studies or assessments to the Public Works Committee. So that is sort of the recap of what the Public Works Committee decided at their recent meeting. Councilmember Yingling, as the chair of the Public Works Committee, is there anything that I did not cover that I should have?
No, this is good. I wanted to clarify something on I&I for the council president, because he wasn't in that meeting and I didn't mention this in my report, and he may know this. Greg, when Joe asked in our last budget meeting, like, why wasn't this money, why are you only asking for $1 million? Because we thought we were, front loading all this. The response we got was like, basically like, he didn't have enough I&I planned, and that was because of like external factors like COVID and everything. So essentially, like, we said, look, we're trying to give you more money. Do you have the work for it? And the answer was no. And so we kind of gave him direction, and we said, look, go find, the work, because we want to front load this money. And so I think next year or this year, he's going to be doing that. Like, so we kind of said to him, look, you need to find this work and come back and ask for more money because we're front loading it. I know the mayor had, kind of said, well, wait, why isn't this all front loaded? It's because I guess the term is like the engineering work or whatever it is. It's just not there. We didn't get around to it because of external factors like COVID. If that, am I right with that, Barb? If you want to clean that up.
I think that was part of it. The other thing, and I can certainly, Council President Pecoraro, share some of the information that I had forwarded to the Public Works Committee in advance of their meeting. For example, for FY, I might get my years wrong. There was one of the years where, I guess it was last year, my office and the finance department received the INI draft RFB in like late February. Obviously, that was just a few weeks before the pandemic hit. And it was obviously a very hectic time. But also, even if we had bid the project out from a practical standpoint, probably not, we would not have been able to undertake much work at all in FY 2020. So the decision was made just to hold it, basically bid it out in July, which is what occurred. The other thing I would just mention as you all talk about advancing work is I did mention to the Public Works Committee that you adopted rates, water and sewer rates for 5 years. The last year of that implementation of those rates from the last study will be FY 2023. So certainly I think since I won't be with the city, Mr. Glass and Ms. Colston will need to undertake a rate study in FY 2023, and certainly whatever funding level is desired for I&I going forward, that should be taken into account in the rates that you set. For the remainder of that 5-year period, certainly there is some opportunity if Mr. Glass has has plans that he can use in FY 2023, or if his situation changes in FY 2022, there is some fiscal capacity under the rates you've adopted to undertake more than $1 million of I&I work, because that's what was assumed in the rate study itself. So I guess, Council President Pecker, unless you have any further questions, I'll just go ahead and, about the Public Works Committee discussion, I'll just go ahead and move on.
No, go ahead. Thank you.
I'll be respectful of your time. So there were also a couple other follow-up items, in part from your last meeting, as well as I mentioned from a Mayor and Common Council meeting. On March 10th, the committee did discuss what to do with the Valley Clubhouse. It was the desire of the Finance Committee. You were so inclined to basically say, since we don't have any plans for the building, that we should look at taking it down just from a risk management standpoint. We did explore kind of using the facility as sort of a live burn training exercise with the fire department. Mr. Strasberg, the superintendent of our street department, met with fire department representatives, I believe it was Wednesday evening of this week. Because of the proximity to the Durbin House and other factors, the fire department indicated they would not be comfortable using that as a live burn training exercise. Mr. Glass was then asked to provide a rough estimate of taking the clubhouse down and removing the debris. Certainly this is not, an item that had been bid out. So this is a rough order of magnitude cost and should be viewed in that manner. But the number he provided to Ms. Colston and myself was about $200,000 to take down the clubhouse and to, remove the debris, restore the site minimally. So I did want to share that information with you. Also at your last meeting, staff had mentioned that we were looking to convert the Main Street manager position upon Ms. Anderson's retirement to a planner 1. In the intervening weeks, and all 3 of you are also on the Economic and Community Development Committee, we had a discussion with Mr. Depot, and the EDC committee did share with Mr. Depot sort of where you wanted his department to go, and the interactions with downtown businesses and the support we would provide. I subsequently had a follow-up discussion with Mr. Depot, and I think given the expectations of the EDC, we would recommend that the Main Street manager position be converted not to a planner 1, but to a planner 2. I think what you envision in terms of interaction with the business community and support is probably better geared towards someone who has more planning experience than less. So originally this was sort of cost neutral because the Main Street manager position and a planner 1 were both in a grade 114. The planner 2 is actually in a higher pay grade. So there'll be some minimal cost impact, but I think given your expectations, it's certainly a good investment to invest in a planner 2 position. I don't know if there's any questions about those 2 items.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
The planner 2, would that also help the department move to take the site plan internally? Was that part of the methodology of selecting that? Remember we talked about that bringing that in-house?
Mr. Depot and I talked about, it wasn't a major contributing factor. We do about 5, maybe half a dozen site plans a year. I think it was more not wanting to hire someone maybe straight out of school and expect them to basically be sort of that ombudsman or support for the business community, that it probably took someone who had a little bit more experience to serve that function. So the last item, which we have not actually discussed with the committee, and I apologize, I probably should have raised it at your March 10th meeting, is there had been some discussion about possibly doing a downtown traffic study. This was discussed at a mayor and common council meeting, in part prompted by just concerns voiced by residents who live around Union Alley. We do not have a cost number for you, certainly, and the broader you define downtown, the more costly the study becomes. So I don't know if that's something, Mr. Glass and I had spoken about, did he have a rough idea of what such a study might cost? His request, I think, was to define what are the boundaries of downtown and what are the specific issues that we would be looking for a traffic engineering firm to study. My guess would be based on the cost we had received just for possibly looking at Union Alley and the immediate surrounding area, that was in the neighborhood of 25,000. So I think if you really, even if you go out just slightly more than that, I'm guessing such a study could probably run in the 50,000 or more range. But it's all going to be determined by what your actual desired scope is. So those were some of the follow-up items, I guess. We then kind of wanted to kind of pivot to sort of decision or discussion points. And certainly I appreciate that, particularly on the salary piece of it. This is information you just saw for the first time. But I think in order to kind of bring the budget to a closure, whether at this meeting or one next week, the decisions that will need to be made is, I guess first and foremost, because this is going to drive a certain amount of cost in and of itself, is does the committee agree with accepting Evergreen's recommendation to shift the pay structure itself by 3%? I certainly think that that is something we need to do in order to get our starting salaries for certain positions at a more, well, actually all positions at a more competitive level. Part of that pay structure recommendation was also, as mentioned, was to reclassify certain public works and police positions, primarily entry level and sort of mid-level positions, by moving them up a grade. As a reminder, just getting employees to minimum under those two pieces alone, and that cost was consistent, is about $266,000 without any benefit cost. So I think that's the first issue I guess I'd like to try to get some direction on is the committee okay with shifting the pay structure 3% and reclassifying those positions based on the market shifts Evergreen noted?
Well, so I don't know where the mayor or Mr. Yingling are on this. I mean, certainly, we've always wanted to do everything we could to have an appropriate pay structure for the employees, and that's why we undertook the previous effort, and we're glad to support that to the to the extent that we could in terms of finding funding for it. The question here is we're looking at a cost of at least $500,000 here. It sounds like to do this. So the question is, Ms. Matthews, you mentioned at one point that we can count on from the increased assessments, bump in our revenue. Would that be adequate, or how much of that, or how much is that going to be adequate to pay for this, or where else would we look for the funding to cover the cost of doing any one of those three tiers, three proposals?
And I'm going to try to answer this the best I can, Council President Pecoraro, without answering a question with a question. So to some degree, it depends what other budget priorities you have. So one of the things I had asked Evergreen to do, and once again, Ms. Colston and I do need to, refine some of the benefit cost.
And can we get a copy of the presentation they did?
Yeah.
Because that would be helpful to be
I
able
will
to.
send that to you.
Thank you.
So most of the impact, I wouldn't say solely, but I would definitely say that most of the impact of any of the three alternatives that Evergreen presented are going to primarily hit the general fund, not 100%, but by and large, that's where it's hitting. Mainly that's being driven by changes in police, whether sworn or non-sworn, but the predominant impact is in the sworn staffing. And then you also see some in streets. And then probably the next biggest group is going to hit water and sewer. So I think if there's not a lot else that's added to the general fund, I mean, once again, Ms. Colson and I need to go back and refine the numbers since these options were just, it's been a moving target trying to get new options so we could give you the best information that we could. There probably is some fiscal capacity in FY 2022 in the general fund. I say that with kind of two caveats. One is that you probably would need to prioritize the employees that currently work for the city versus adding new staff. And that would certainly be my recommendation to the committee. I think you take care of those you have currently before you start adding in new staff positions. And you see the staffing request on the screen right now. And I say that with the full acknowledgement that I think the positions that were being requested by Mr. Davidson and Mr. Strasburg, those staffing additions have merit. I certainly don't mean to suggest otherwise. The other kind of longer term caveat, which makes this difficult, and this might be a little bit easier discussion once we kind of show you some other pieces of the budget this morning, is the whole issue surrounding the fiber fund. It's one thing to say, if that issue did not exist, I would probably be more comfortable this morning and at this moment telling you that you have the fiscal capacity to do these wage adjustments. I believe you have it in FY22, but when that state loan runs out, which is going to run out the next fiscal year, there is a whole different financial picture that the city is going to be facing. So if Council President Pecoraro, perhaps with your concurrence, maybe I'll just kind of walk through the other pieces of the budget and we can circle back.
Sure, that'd be fine.
I just want to try to give you the most information that I can. So once again, these are just sort of the staffing requests that were made, and we sort of already touched on this. Mr. Davidson requested both last year and this year what he has referred to as a desktop support technician. I did want to note that I've slightly tweaked these numbers based on the Evergreen's work, but the desktop support technician has not been formally classified. Mr. Davidson would need to provide us with an actual job description that I can then work with Ms. McCullough and Evergreen to classify, but we've tentatively put it in a pay grade 112. And this is more of an entry-level job, but the fully loaded cost of this position is probably in the neighborhood of $81,000. Certainly that cost could come down if the person didn't elect family health insurance coverage. The street department, we did add a position, an equipment operator position in FY 2021. Mr. Strasburg requested 1 to 2. I think he was trying to get what he could. The equipment operator position is one of the entry-level positions in public works that would be proposed for reclassification. The fully loaded cost of each equipment operator position is roughly about $67,000. Once again, I think all these positions have merit. Certainly over the period of the last 10 to 12 years, and I have data I could share with the committee that Mr. Bloom and Mr. Strasburg have both provided. We've seen new residential developments in terms of Stonegate and Bolton Hill. We've taken on more responsibility with those developments, not only in terms of bulk trash pickup, which is done directly by city staff, but also new stormwater management facilities that they're responsible for maintaining. So I certainly think the street department, in particular, their workload has increased considerably. The question, once again, is, do we have the fiscal capacity to add new positions? And as I stated just a few minutes ago, I would certainly encourage the committee to prioritize pay structure adjustment and wage adjustment for the staff that we have existing. And we also need to talk about the fiber fund. So we'll circle back around. Kind of switching to the capital projects fund, and I just kind of want to show this to you, but this is what you saw from the last meeting. And as you noted, we have some debt service that is going to come off. So I'm kind of using this as sort of a precursor to show you that there will be more flexibility a couple years from now than there currently is in the capital projects fund as debt service falls off, and assuming the city doesn't undertake any new debt. This is sort of where we are, and I was going to show you the CIP, but basically Ms. Colston and I have been working to refine the capital projects fund. This, once again, is the non-utility capital. Currently, departmental requests exceed our available funding. There's a number of reasons for that, and I'll switch screens in just a moment, but part of this is attributable to new projects showing up in the CIP for the first time. And I want to, so some of the options before I actually switch to the capital projects fund kind of screen, there's some options to deal with that. Certainly, you could defer projects that are not time sensitive to future years to try to kind of buy some time until the debt falls off. You could scale back funding from the departmental request, and there's one specific item that I know Ms. Colston and I have discussed. If you see projects that are just not a priority, then I would encourage you to eliminate them altogether. And then one of the options you have for FY 2022 in particular is you could transfer from excess reserves. Certainly one-time money is appropriately used for a one-time non-recurring capital project. And one of the options that I think you do have for FY 2022 that will not necessarily exist in the future is that we sold West End Place, for example, for $430,000. At the direction of the Mayor and Common Council, the FY 2022 budget could show that funding being allocated from the general fund unrestricted reserve to capital, for example. We hope to be selling the parking lot in front of 56 West for $120,000. I think the issue, as I switch screens in a moment, is that when you look at the broader, longer term picture of the CIP, there are definitely what we can do to get by FY 22 is sort of a one-stop measure. When you see the broader CIP, and I'll bring that up in just a minute, I see Councilmember Yingling has a question. There's also going to be funding shortfalls in the next couple years until the debt service decreases. So I think this is once again getting into a matter of what your priorities are. Councilmember Yingling, it looked like you had a question.
Yeah, and maybe you're going to answer this later, but you said that the requests exceed available funding. Like, how short are we? What's that number?
I will bring that up right now. Just give me one moment. So this is the current, what the CIP looks like, and some numbers. Ms. Colston, you might have to help me out here a little bit, but I'll get to the bottom line first. So basically, this is what requests total for FY 2022. So it's roughly $5.3 million. The available revenues, these are kind of capital fund revenues. So we have about 4.44 roughly. This excludes any new benefit assessment dollars that were coming in, but it does include the bond proceeds for the pool. We do have one piece of equipment. It's a leaf vacuum that was requested by the street department. As a reminder, the special benefit assessment reserve money, all the benefit assessment fees are tied to growth. So that becomes a little bit more challenging in this fund to tie something specifically to growth. What we focused on in FY 2021 and what we're proposing to focus on in FY 2022 is any equipment purchases for the street department that we can say with reasonable confidence are tied to growth in the city. So the leaf vacuum request was specifically tied to growth in Bolton Hill and other residential developments. So it seemed to be an appropriate use for that $90,000. We also have, Ms. Colston's calculated about $280,000 in funding. It may be slightly higher, but about $280,000 in funding from FY 2021 that for a variety of reasons is not going to be expended. So that funding can be reappropriated. But even with that reappropriation, we're left with about a $473,000 shortfall in departmental request and what people want. So a couple things to And Ms. Colston, please, jump in here. So these are some changes from kind of the last meeting. So this number, this is for, we had budgeted this year to do a parking study, kind of not just looking at the meters and different ways of doing that, but also some aspects of the zoning code in terms of what people charge who don't have parking. I will be, in full disclosure, Ms. Palmer worked with some of the departments. It has been sitting in my inbox for probably about 2 months now, just due to workload considerations. My hope is before I depart is that we can get that study out on the street. But I think you probably recall that we have meters that just basically are outdated. Ms. Colston, I believe since your last meeting went and talked to Mr. Strasberg to help refine those numbers. We already talked last time about the building generator at the police department, the city hall roof replacement. Some of the other areas that are also sort of new to the CIP, apologize, I'm jumping a little bit. Many of these things are very standard. Pool renovation is obviously new, but that's tied to the bond funding. But this is probably the line item I want to call your attention to. And Ms. Colston, please jump in if I overlook anything. We do have funding that is currently in the CIP to begin the process of implementing the Wakefield Valley Park Master Plan. The emphasis as proposed would be starting to take what was the golf cart path and actually turn those into trails, but have to meet certain standards. But if you go across, this is like a $1.3 million, well, because it didn't total, I must have cut something off, but it's quite a considerable amount of money. There is the possibility for grant funding. Part of that cost in FY 2022 would be offset by an existing $86,000 program open space grant. It is the city's turn to apply for more program open space funding for FY 2022, but that application process has not opened up yet. And I think the county doesn't know what they're getting from the state, therefore they can't say what's available to the municipalities. Some other kind of hits that we're taking, the Center Street Outfall project. This is obviously, as the name implies, it's a Center Street outfall that is failing. It's in the design stage now. So that's new. So I think the thing most importantly I wanted to kind of draw to the committee's attention, we talked about debt service, but keep in mind that we have almost $5.3 million. Part of that is offset by the pool, obviously, but when you look across the years, so the pool is in here roughly for 1.2 million. But you're not seeing a $1.2 million fall necessarily entirely in FY 2023. And look what the numbers end up being again in FY 2024, FY 2025. And that's where I think this misalignment in terms of until the debt falls off between capital request, you can determine whether or not you feel there are needs versus available funding. One of the things we did last year, which is, is not entirely desirable, I would be the first to admit that, is in the FY 2021 budget, because we had a similar issue, we basically reduced the annual road paving amount to align with available HUR funding. And Ms. Colston, what the difference in those two numbers is about what, roughly 300,000?
Correct.
Okay. So certainly, that's something Lydia and I have talked about. I do think Mr. Glass has a good grasp on what he feels we should be investing in road paving. And when road paving is deferred, you end up paying for it. So I think the question, that Lydia and I could use some help with today, either today or once again, we may find ourselves in a situation, Chair Pecoraro, that you want to just have a meeting next week to kind of be able to mull some of this over a little bit more. Do we drop projects off of this list? Do we reduce things like annual road paving? Do we take some of the money that we have from the sale of properties and use that as a one-time funding source to get us through this situation in FY 2022.
Mr.
Well,
Chair.
see, let the mayor weigh in as well as Mr. Yingling. My initial thought, just to throw this out there, and I think we're going to need some time to think some of this over a little bit more, and I'm happy to meet next week, a couple of times if we need to. But, we do have, I think some of this, one-time money we're receiving, from property deals is considering that we are not, I don't think we need to build the reserves any further at this point, and so I think that, using these funds for other one-time uses, such as these, CIP type projects is a very appropriate use of those funds. And so my view would be that we should factor, that revenue, into some of that work. But that's just my initial take on it. Mr. Mayor, you wanted to say something?
That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, good. Well, I'm
Thank you.
glad we're thinking alike. That's good.
Yeah, so I think if, you may want to, once again, there's been a few other changes since your last meeting, and, I hope you can appreciate it's kind of a convergence of factors with our relocation and budget
Sure.
and other things. So I apologize for not having this information to you a little bit before now. One thing I did want to call out to you, and I'm going to have Ms. Colston speak about this, but we're only showing you the capital projects fund because that's the fund that has the biggest issue and what we needed your direction on. But Ms. Colston, could you speak a little bit to the ERP implementation, which also hits, I believe, water, sewer, and fiber, because you're certainly more well-versed in that than I am.
Sure. So what has been going on is that we have found out that Tyler is going to be sunsetting, in essence, the current system that we're using for accounting and the ERP system. So we've had preliminary talks with Tyler, and I've reached out to various other companies about products that they offer and whatnot. And Tyler has come back favorable with moving to a comparable system that they have called Munis. And if we were to go that route, it results in a savings of $126,000 implementation costs. So what you're seeing is 1/4 of that ERP implementation. Speaking with the technology department, they recommend getting it ahead of the curve and starting this in this current year versus waiting until it's too late, in essence, and everybody else is trying to switch. So that's why I showed it in the 2022 CIP, but it's something that's going to have to be done within the next couple of years. A full integration or implementation of the system is going to take 2 to 3 years. So to get started now would be ideal. I don't know if you have any other questions about that. I can be sure to answer them for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor?
Ms. Colston, so if I remember correctly, when we were when you were interviewing for the position, I think one of the things we dug into was you have transitioned to this type of software before, correct?
Correct.
And what did you transition from and to? What softwares were they?
We transferred from a system called Trio, which is I'm pretty sure it's specific to New England. It's by Harris, and we transitioned to Munis.
Okay, so you have experience transitioning to this very software.
Yeah. And
you are a fan of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it provides a lot of good reporting capabilities. It's a good system at a decent price. Just to give you a little information, one of the other companies that I had contacted, their costs for a similar product was their annual cost was roughly $75,000 more a year, and I just couldn't see where that kind of an increase of cost was justified.
What do you is there anything that you could, or is it is there for the extra 75? Is there anything that we wouldn't be getting with this product that we would with that would be beneficial?
No, actually, I think the other product had less. So there would have been additional costs getting everything that we needed.
I think my opinion is then, since one of the reasons we liked you so much, because we knew this was coming up, Is that why wait to get this done with the expert with experience of making the transition? I think we should probably act sooner rather than later on this. So that's my opinion.
Mr. President, am I allowed to speak if I'm not acknowledged?
He looks like he's a ghost.
I would say you're fine. Or is there gonna be an awkward silence?
I don't know. He's probably going to want to hear what I have to say right now. In fact, I probably really should wait for him
There
to
he
come
is.
back.
apologize.
Mr. President. No, that's okay. I wanted to wait because I think you'll probably want to think about what I'm about to say here. Okay, so I guess my kind of approach with this is let's like talk turkey here. All right. So look, we got to pave the streets. We've got to buy police cars, got to invest in our equipment, I don't really see areas there that we would necessarily cut. Okay. And I'm going to focus a little bit here on, or I'm going to focus all on, the considerable expenses of, implementing this Wakefield Valley master plan. And I think the Durbin House, that's I guess a one-time thing, 200,000. Then what's the other one up there, like 350,000 or something like that?
So I think one thing with the Durbin House is, just as a reminder, that's this item right here. So the Durbin House, we would only likely move forward if we got the $100,000 MHAA grant. But they're part of the master plan envisioning, which certainly you all control. Something can go in a plan, but you decide whether or not what elements you want to implement.
Mm-hmm.
I know the longer term vision was to try to turn the Durbin House into some sort of visitor center, kind of talking about the history of the property and the Durbin House. The other item, which I'll scroll up to, is this one I think you're asking about.
Yeah. So look, all right. So we get this master plan done and we solicited a lot of community input.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows that I was more on the, side of making, of developing the property into a revenue generating source. That's not what the community said they wanted to do. All right. So that's fine. But there's, also significant expense to having a nice park. So the community wants to have a nice park. We have to figure out how we're going to pay for that nice park. I think it would be appropriate then, because since this is a significant amount of money in the upcoming years, that we investigate, a small park fee so we can do exactly what the community wants us to do. Build pickleball courts, build pavilions, that's going to take maintenance. So I think that a fee would be appropriate, and we could, I don't know what that fee looks like, how we can do it legally. But, then we ensure that, hey, we're going to do exactly what the community wanted with that master plan and have a really nice park for everybody.
It's certainly, if I may, certainly something we can explore, and I could, reach out to some colleagues. Maryland, compared to other states, is fairly restrictive in terms of what municipalities can do. State I worked in for 18 years had a variety of sales taxes that you could put in place, including ones for public safety, ones for park development. To the best of my knowledge, Maryland doesn't have anything like that, but certainly we can do some research, Councilmember Yingling, to see what options there might be. The other option, certainly I do think when you've engaged people and people, kind of want to see park improvements, it's nice to have some movement. The other thing the committee may just want to kind of mull over and can give direction, since it does appear we'll probably need a meeting for next week. Part of this 260,000, I think, was to do some engineering related work. The other thing you could do is push this project back in the CIP and wait to see what type of grant funding Ms. Gruber is able to secure. As I mentioned, I do think there's probably a really good opportunity to get some additional program open space funds for FY 2022. She just hasn't been allowed to basically apply yet, and the county doesn't know what the number is. But there's a possibility that some of that 260 cost, in addition to the roughly 86 we already have, if Ms. Gruber is able to secure some funding. So one option the committee, like I say, just may want to mull over is, pushing this back a little bit and just let Ms. Gruber work her magic and try to get some grant funding so it's not hitting the same fund. So that's just something for you all to consider. And then once again, staff is happy to kind of explore Mr. Yingling's idea of, is there some way of beyond a property tax increase of, assessing some other type of fee for Wakefield? I don't know.
Let me just say I think, Mr. Yingling, made a good suggestion there. And, I think that the challenge is, how would you assess such a, a fee of whatever type it was? When you look at sort of the geography of Wakefield, people are going to be accessing it from a variety of different points. So I'm not sure, that you could sort of charge people as they strolled in from various different places to use it. You doing it as a tax, doesn't begin to cover the many non-city residents who will be using the facility, which is unfair to city residents, to place the entire burden on them. So while I think I think these kinds of assessing sort of users to help pay for the cost of things, and in particular in this case, because while while I don't necessarily agree, while I agree with the community's request that the park largely remain available for passive recreation type activities, as opposed to a lot more organizational things that might drive some revenue, as we were talking about. At the same time, I've said from the beginning that when the council, a previous mayor and council accepted the deal to take over to take the property in exchange for the water rights there, that managing and maintaining this large parcel of property was going to become a significant expense for the city, and that our planning ought to include some thought for how we were going to manage that. And I don't think we've ever been able to come up with an adequate way of doing that. I certainly haven't, and nobody else has been able to suggest one that doesn't have a significant amount of activity involved on the property. So so it's a very difficult thing to balance. How do we maintain this large piece of property that people like to have in the condition it's in without changing the nature of the use of the property that people don't want to see change? So it's a challenge, and it's one that I'm not sure that people can expect us to be able to do without some kind of additional revenue coming in. I mean, I think that may just be a fact of life, that there's got to be some way to generate some revenue, to manage, this large parcel of property, in the city that, years ago when we had set tax rates and things like that, we had not expected this kind of expense. So something we need to think about. Mr. Yingling.
So I appreciate you, and your perspective. In terms of like fairness to the residents, I think it is fair, if we were to put a fee on it. The residents pay for roads, and people drive on our roads and tear up our roads all the time. So that don't pay our city taxes for that. So I just respectfully disagree about the fairness point. I think it is fair. The residents want a very nice park. They've made it very clear that they, don't want, revenue generating activities there, at least substantial revenue generating activities there. So there's, I think it's fair that we have to consider how we pay for that. It's the residents' park, the community's park. So I just think that a Wakefield Valley Park fee, if we can legally do it, I don't know if we can, would be something to consider, and would ensure that the community gets exactly, what they want, because that's what's most important.
Yeah, my only other comment I would add, I think, to Council President Pecorara's comments, and certainly, this is more of an intergovernmental kind of elected body to elected body discussion, is I know that I have had not most recently about the master plan, but I've had discussions in the past with some, some county commissioners about Wakefield and, developing, that for better community use. I certainly am not trying to suggest that the county has the fiscal capacity or even the inclination, but I don't think there's any doubt that Wakefield is sort of a destination park compared to some that are like, King Park that's embedded in a neighborhood. It certainly might not be at least an idea to talk to some of your counterparts on the county, board of commissioners to see if, if the county has any interest, because certainly I believe there's probably residents outside, as Council President Pecoraro noted, county residents outside of Westminster who probably use that park. So I think this is going to be just one of the discussion points, probably at your next meeting is, certainly we can, take the money that we're getting from, that we got from the sale of West End, the 430,000, and have the budget transfer that, whether this year or not, as a revenue source in the capital projects fund. If we move forward with selling the parking lot, the Winters lot, you could do the same thing for that 120,000. What I would encourage the committee to do, so being respectful of your time, because I know we're already at an hour and a half, is I will send this, I'm going to focus on this fund just because I think it's where the issues probably tend to exist. I will also send this to you. And as Ms. Colston and I work to refine just the broader CIP, we will send that to you as well. But it would probably be helpful if you all look at these projects when you have more time to do so. And, just let us know if there's things such as Wakefield Valley Park. Do you want us to kind of leave them in, but perhaps push them out a little bit until we know what funding we have?
Mr. Chair. No, sorry, I thought you were.
That's okay. I'm done.
I would just say that since I will be departing from my position here shortly, my suggestion would be if we if it ever does get to the point where we go to the county, we wait until they figure out a solution to their dump situation before we talk about a big parcel of land in the middle of the city. Half joking, half not on that. So just throwing that out there.
Now,
There's a lot of wisdom in what you
say.
say, Mr. Mayor.
That's revenue generating.
That's revenue generating. It's time to bring back the incinerator project. Let's put it right in the middle of the city. No, so I just a thought that I would share before.
A lot of wisdom in that recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Maybe.
So, Council President Pecoraro, if you're okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this down and just go back to the broader.
Yeah, go ahead.
And we don't have
Thank
that
you.
many slides left. I guess I do want to be respectful of your time. So we just talked about the capital projects fund. I want to kind of switch gears to the fiber fund. This is the same slide you saw before. The next few are going to be the same slide, so I don't spend a lot of time, but this is just to put into context, the current debt service situation in the fiber fund. As you can see, we're roughly at about $925,000, for the foreseeable future. This is the same slide you saw before as well. This is the status of the state operating loan. We expect as of June 30th of 2021, the end of this fiscal year, that we'll have $516,855 left to draw down. This is also the same slide you saw before. This is just showing you kind of what the take rates have looked like. So as we mentioned before, there has certainly been some continued growth in the pilot and the other 4 phases, but it's been incremental. And obviously we're now just starting to try to pick up areas outside the city limits that can be easily served without a lot of design expense. So this is what, as things stand right now, unless there's any guidance from the committee to the contrary, this is what the fiber fund looks like in terms of revenues. Obviously, fund revenues are in part driven by what we use as take rate assumptions. So Ms. Colston, Ms. Palmer, and I spent some time talking about this. We went back and did a look back over the last 7 months. Obviously, that last 7 months has been during the time of the COVID pandemic. So I think part of the question, if you have any guidance today, this would be helpful. Is what we've seen the last year in terms of Ting subscribers reflective of what we should expect to see going forward? Our assumption at this point is that there will be 28 new subscribers per month. Once again, that's sort of taking into account what we've seen the last 7 months. I would say that Ting's own internal number is about 38 new subscribers per month. That's just not what we have seen. And, we want to basically try to use something that we thought would maybe, not aspirational, but what we've seen. But I would be the first to admit that we don't, the fiber network is still relatively young. We don't have tons of data, especially for some phases 3 and 4. So this is kind of anyone's best guess. But using that take rate assumption of 28 new subscribers per month, whether in the city or outside the city, total fund revenues then become $1.44 million. And I want to break that down. So Ting subscriber premise fees are estimated to be about $825,000, once again, based on those take rate assumptions above. In FY 2022, staff anticipates that we will be drawing down the entire remaining balance of the state loan proceeds of $517,000 roughly. There's other revenues of about $3,000, and there would still need to be a general fund transfer of about $95,000. So basically, the general fund transfer is needed even after the state loan proceeds to have the fund break, basically be at zero. A couple things I just want to call to your attention, which is that at this point in the budget process, none of these numbers basically include any kind of staff wage adjustments. We basically stripped everything down in position budgeting to have a clean slate to try to overlay the various alternatives from Evergreen. The other piece, and I'll just go ahead and switch to expenditures. So no wage adjustments are in those numbers. The benefit policy increases are reflected in those numbers. One of the issues that we've talked about before, our current staffing expense allocation does not truly reflect the full operational cost of running the network. For example, Ms. Colston's position, certainly she spends time on fiber related activities, as does mine, as does Mr. Glass's. As does the superintendent over utility maintenance. None of those positions are expensed in any way to the fiber fund. So I think as you look at these numbers, keep in mind that we're not really fully showing what it costs to run that network. So I think a question today is, does the committee have any interest in reviewing and or modifying the present staffing allocation to the fiber fund? If there's options you want staff to bring back, we can certainly do that. Obviously, as more staff salaries get allocated to the fiber fund, the worse the financial position becomes. And it certainly will decline from what I just showed because wage adjustments are not in there. As I mentioned, some of the positions that are being impacted by the Evergreen study recommendations are the entry-level positions such as equipment operators. That is going to ricochet through utility maintenance. So it will, even under the current allocation, these numbers that I just showed you are going to get worse once those factors are overlaid. The other thing before I just open it up, just to kind of finish everything up, this is, at your last meeting, the committee basically indicated that pending further discussion with your colleagues, staff was to include a continued $80,000 grant to Magic for FY 2022. At this point in the budget process, it is showing as a general fund expense. And the reason for that is going back to revenues. There's no point in showing it in the fiber fund since we're already having to get a general fund transfer to make the fiber fund break even. All that's going to happen is if we book the Magic grant to the general fund, is you're going to have a general fund transfer of $175,000. And that made no sense to staff to not just keep it in the general fund because that's where it's being funded from anyway, in a practical sense. So that's I think as kind of going back to what you all had talked about earlier and the very valid question of, what can the city afford to do relative to employee wage adjustments? So certainly a piece of that puzzle is, do we add new staff positions? Because that's going to take fiscal capacity away. But the other issue is exactly what you're looking at right here. These loan proceeds, once again, are going to be exhausted in FY 2022. Certainly, I sent staff some information about other, the state grant program, since I won't be here, and basically keeping an eye on, any other possibilities for funding through the Maryland Broadband, the governor's office. But in the absence of some, subscriber premise fees just going off the charts, and even that's not going to solve the problem, you are looking at us, or the fiber fee that Councilmember Yingling has brought up, which, I will be discussing with Ms. Levan to try to move that along to the extent I can prior to my departure. But the city's looking at basically, in excess of $600,000 transfer from the general fund to make the fiber fund break even, beginning in FY 2023. And that's why it's so hard to answer your question about raises in FY 2022, because I think the fiscal capacity is likely there. This is what's looming on the horizon. And at this point, there is not a solution to that problem. And that's where things become tricky for the mayor and common council.
All right.
So I don't know. I mean, all we really had left, Council President Pecoraro, to kind of go over is just what the budget schedule calls for, which is, presenting the budget on April 12th. That will be tight, but I think if we can nail some of these things down, get information to the committee, get your guidance on certain things, I believe that's still doable. On that date, we will just be introducing the budget ordinance. We'll have budget work session 1 and a public hearing on April 19th, which is your special meeting. Second public hearing, the constant yield tax rate hearing, work session 2, and then basically adoption currently is scheduled for May 10th. So kind of our wrap-up information is, what other information can staff provide relative to what we've talked about today? I've marked down the mayor's question about the lowest pay grade that we're planned to use with Evergreen to make sure there's no issues with the minimum wage. I have as a follow-up item to send you all the Evergreen presentation, and certainly I will send you the Capital Projects Fund information, and I can do that, the Evergreen information and the CIP draft immediately after this meeting. And we're just kind of looking for what other information, and we need to calculate the benefit cost, obviously, for the various salary options. So I don't know if there's any other information, whether about what you talked about today or just data request in general, that you would like staff to provide you.
So I would like to have a copy of this presentation to be able to sort of, without having to, ask you to go back and forth and pull up slides again. That'd be very helpful. And, obviously we need the information on, the benefits calculations if we were to do any of those pay increases, that were discussed, by Evergreen, because that's an important factor. I'd like to suggest, and I don't know what staff's availability is for this, or what the mayor or Mr. Yingling's availability is. I can be available for another meeting at this time any morning next week, and probably the sooner the better.
I agree.
Because I think it would be good to have this information, to give you a chance to go and gather some other information, and then let's come to a meeting next week prepared to make some decisions.
Tuesday, Wednesday is fine. I don't know.
Are you all moving on Monday, Ms. Matthews? Is that the case?
We're actually moving as we speak. The trucks are there.
All right.
I'd like to make sure some of the information, Council President Pecoraro, I can provide, today, and I will certainly do that.
Right.
I'll have a copy of not only this presentation, Evergreens, but also the one from the prior meeting. And then Ms. Colston and I can talk. Monday, I'm on leave, as you know. I'd like to make sure when I get back that Ms. Colston and I have time to sort of dot all the I's and cross all the T's, because I want to be respectful of your time. So I would say, and Ms. Colston, please jump in here, because I don't know what your schedule is, that we're probably looking at either Wednesday or Thursday, because Friday is a city holiday next week. It's a Good Friday holiday.
Okay.
Ms. Colston, do you have any conflicts Wednesday or Thursday morning?
I do not.
And I guess, Ms. Vasosky, obviously, we need you to help us out as well. Is your schedule clear Wednesday or Thursday morning?
I believe so. I'm taking a look at it right now. I don't see anything. Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong day. Hold on 1 second, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't see anything on my calendar.
Okay. So do you all have a preference of which day? Staff?
Well, I'm fine with either Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever. I mean, yeah, if you need more time, if doing it Tuesday would give you and Ms. Colston more time to, get ready for, the next step of getting the budget done so we can keep it moving, that's fine. Or if you want to do Wednesday, then give yourselves Tuesday to make sure you've got everything together. Either way is fine with me.
I would say either Wednesday or Thursday. I'm off on Monday, so I won't be available to Ms. Colston.
Any day works for me at that time. Early in the morning like that, I'm good.
Well, why don't we say Wednesday morning at 8:30 again? How's that?
That's fine. Yep.
Right. And Ms. Viscoski, you'll send out a meeting invitation for us?
I will, yes, I'll take care of
Thank
that.
you. That'd be great.
Um,
Okay, well, let's do that.
Okay, and Council President Pecoraro, just one item, I think most of it, I think I know like what we need to do. At this juncture, is there anything that you need for Ms. Colston or I to follow up with Mr. Glass on regarding the traffic study? Or is that an issue you just want to kind of set aside for now?
I think we can set it aside for now. And we can revisit that
Okay.
later on. And if we do decide to do it, I don't anticipate it being a really expensive study, and perhaps it's just something that we can take money from reserves for but we've got to have some conversations, as Mr. Yingling has noted, recently about moving forward with the Stockdale property, and what our realistic timeline is going to be for that. And I think that's going to factor into what would be needed in that study. So
that will certainly make things a lot easier if we're not trying to chase that down now. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we're going to have, just a side note, Miss Matthews and I talked to this or emailed this week. We're going to try to have that EDC meeting with our consultants like late April, early May.
that's great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Yingling.
Ms. Colston,
Ms. Colston, do you late April, you said, or early May? Let's make sure we do it in late April so that you're still around for it.
Okay, yeah. And
no, I'll be there.
Okay, good.
Ms. Colston, did you have anything else today that I haven't brought up? I know you've been in the weeds a little bit more on some issues than I have been.
No, the only thing I wanted to, I did want to bring up actually is in regards to the CIP plan is that I know there had been some discussion last year prior to my arrival here about the family center. In the CIP is roughly $65,000 for a locker room upgrade. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, given that history, as to whether or not that is something that you guys wanted to undertake.
Well, and I'm curious, actually, I was going to ask this earlier, and it got away from me because we kept moving along. So there's a disinclination to do a larger, sort of a full-scale study or understanding of all the needs of the Armory building, and so I'm not sure. I mean, the locker room stuff needs to get done. If we want to keep using the building for this purpose, it needs to get done. I mean, I've been in there, and I recognize that. At the same time, I've said for years that there's got to be some kinds of savings, in having a thoughtful plan that deals with all the problems in the building in a staged sort of way, and yet we never can get to where anybody has put together or can at least show me that kind of a plan if it exists. So I fail to see why we continue to resist doing that.
I came up with a plan last year, but
yeah, that was a different plan, Mr. Mayor.
I actually, it's interesting we talk about this because I meant to bring it up, and I'd like to see for the next meeting how that fitness center is doing financially. Since that was is the plan I think Mr. Mayor was referencing.
Mhm.
Maybe
I think
not.
so. I'm not sure that the pandemic is helpful. I mean, they were closed for much of that time. So
Yeah, well, I still want to see the financials
yeah,
and
but
kind of
no,
get
I think it's worth seeing. Absolutely.
know.
I'm just saying, I think that's going to be
well, we
something.
still want to look at those.
The group that was
I can
created
certainly
to-
put that together. It's part of my departmental report every month. That is a component of it. So I will do that for as of this current date and get that to you.
The
Sure.
group that was vocal about the closing last year, they all left and went to another gym. They went to a CrossFit gym. So if you guys ever have to broach that again, it should be much easier since the
Yeah, and if I
10
may
or
just
12
add-
people that were all fired up are gone.
and if I could just add, I think we can certainly, and as Lydia said, she's been including that information in the departmental report. The picture for FY 2021, I think the big question mark is what do things look like going forward? As I think, you noted, it's been the pandemic and there's probably been some reluctance of some people to return to the gym. The other issue is it was sort of a transitional year with full-time staff, leaving. So I think we can certainly show you what FY 2021 looks like. I think the bigger question, which, Ms. Colston can certainly work with Ms. Gruber on, is, kind of what's in the budget now for FY 2022? What were the assumptions, and make sure you all are comfortable with that. Council President Pecoraro, just one last comment. I'm just going to, it's not really affecting what we're doing currently for the budget, but I did just want to note, I think most of you are aware that Congress enacted and the president signed the American Rescue Plan state and local fiscal recovery funds was a part of that. Based on information, I know some of you have seen from Senator Cardin's office, which was quite helpful. We're not an entitlement city, so we will get funding based on population, and the regulations for how this is actually going to be applied have not yet been published. The information that I have from Senator Cardin's office is that Westminster is going to receive about $15.58 million. The way that that is to be distributed, as I understand it, is that the U.S. Treasury will basically be remitting funds to the state. We are a non-entitlement community, so it's basically going to the state as a pass-through. The state will then distribute the funds to the city within 30 days after the state receives it. Municipal funds are going to be issued in what they refer to as 2 tranches, with 50% available in this sort of roughly 90 to 120 day time frame, and the second tranche available 1 year. There are a variety of things that it appears the money can be used for. Probably of most interest to the city is going to be making what they're characterizing as necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So what all that means will be determined once the regulations are actually published by the federal government. It's not clear, for example, whether or not those funds can be applied to infrastructure projects that are already under construction or not. So I think that will be something Ms. Colston will need to work, particularly with Mr. Glass and with the Mayor and Common Council. Obviously, of those of us on the call, there's 3 of us who will not be here when those funds are received. But I did just want to note that the expenditure of those funds, once again, assuming that all unfolds as I'm expecting, the city will have until December 31st of 2024 to expend them. So I just wanted to get this probably on everybody's radar screen, particularly for Ms. Colston's benefit and Council President Pecoraro's benefit, since they will be continuing on. The city will just have to kind of track those regulations. The county will share information. It seems to be largely geared towards water and sewer and possible broadband, but what exactly that means and how the city can use those funds is sort of a question mark. So that'll be something that staff will need to update you on once more information becomes available, and that will be during FY 2022. So it's not material to your consideration of the budget, but it certainly might help ease things in some of the utility funds going forward.
And yeah, I've been following this pretty closely for professional reasons, as well as watching it for the city. And there's also going to be I think before too much longer, a significant sum of money that is going to be appropriated for as part of an infrastructure package.
Yeah.
That is going to be definitely geared towards a number of things that we're interested in, including water and sewer. There's a significant sum of money being talked about for that, as well as for expanding broadband capability and other purposes, roads and things like that, lots of other infrastructure. So one of the things that I'm concerned about, and I think we really need to be focused on, I've been thinking in the last couple of days, is our readiness to pursue that money. Some of it will automatically come to us,
Right.
but some of it is going to have to be chased a little bit.
Correct.
And I don't know, I mean, one of the things that I've been concerned about the last couple of years is that I don't think the city is positioned to be chasing grant funds the way we used to be, in other times. And the city used to receive a lot of grant funds. So I'm wondering if what we need to do about that. I know that there are people who do this for a living, who have, little consulting businesses they spend a lot of time understanding how these grants work and being able to chase them and apply for them. I don't know whether that's a solution, whether there's a solution is finding somebody on the staff to assign to make that a significant responsibility for them. But I think that's critically important to us in the months ahead, that we not be left out in Westminster, be able to access these funds, to be able to make some of these things happen in the city.
Two kind of off the cut, I think the points you're raising, Council President Pecoraro, are excellent ones. Kind of two kind of initial gut reaction thoughts. From a staff standpoint, Ms. Palmer might be well positioned to do that because she's a special projects manager and this is a special project. She obviously doesn't have some of the day-to-day responsibilities that Ms. Colston is bogged down with. The other thing I would say is, you're right, federal funding has a lot of nuances. And ultimately, some of it can, depending on whether it's kind of pass-through or entitlement funding, sometimes, you need lobbying assistance. If it would be helpful, there certainly are a number of cities that I'm familiar with in Montgomery County, including one that I previously worked for right before coming to Westminster, that actually have contracts with a federal lobbyist to basically help them kind of stay on top of this. So there may be two pieces to this puzzle. If that's something you'd like me to try to at least get some contact information that I can obtain for you, I'm happy to.
And we might also ask MML,
Right.
because I think they'd be a good resource on this.
Yeah, and I would hope that MML, especially through Jim Peck's research capabilities, would be tracking this. But I will reach out to Scott Hancock. I'll also just go ahead in the interest of time and my limited time with the city remaining, is get some names of some federal lobbyists so that you have that in case that would be helpful to you.
Well, if we get someone that's good, it's going to pay for itself. So
Yes,
right. Exactly. So, yep. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and send you what information we can later today. And then Ms. Colston and I will kind of regroup and make sure we're prepared for your meeting next Wednesday morning.
Sounds
so
good.
Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. And it's been very helpful to us.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll see you all next week.